Michael Rummel.
Here.
Alderman Swarthout.
Here.
Alderman Grumhouse.
Here.
Alderman Widman.
Here.
Alderman Elliott is absent. Alderman Marsh.
Here.
Alderman Hanrahan.
Here.
Alderman Levy.
Here.
Alderman Haddad. Here. 8 present, 1 absent. Mr. Mayor, we have a quorum.
Please join me in the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Under my comments tonight, I've asked several council members to make comments about other things that are happening because I just want to leave my comments to 2 things. Number one, for those of you that had the pleasure or to go to the tree lighting on the day after Thanksgiving last Friday, we're close, somewhere between 3,000 to 5,000 people was the estimate from the police department. This was truly a great community event, and I wanted to thank everyone for coming. It was a lot of fun to get out there and have the community there. And it just reminds me that we are in the season where things to be thankful for. And I just wanted to say personally from my standpoint, I want to be thankful for the council I have around me because these people work tirelessly at making the city better. And I also want to thank the community at large because without you, we don't have a city. And truly, it was seen on that evening that the number of people that showed up, that this community spirit is great. So I want to thank you all in this holiday season and wish you Merry Christmas, Happy Hanukkah, or whatever happy holidays. And that was the end of my comments for this evening. I'll turn it over to the city manager.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor, members of the council. This evening we have a community spotlight on our beloved Gorton Community Center, and we have Gorton Board Chairman Dick Day here this evening to present a little presentation on what's going on at Gorton. So, Dick, if you could come up, please, to the podium.
Mr. Mayor, council members, good evening. My name is Dick Day. I live over on Northmore, and very glad to be here tonight to represent Gorton and to present to the community in this community spotlight segment. We're going to give a little bit of background about Gorton. Let people know, if they're not already familiar with Gorton, hopefully they are. But Gorton is a combination. It's a wonderful mix, wonderful place. We have cultural programs that we present. That includes our Fine Arts Center, which a lot of people are aware of, don't necessarily all take advantage of, but it's something that they should be aware of and look into. We provide educational classes, a variety of things for all ages, everything from the whimsical and fun to the serious, where people really come to learn and be educated about whether it's operating cameras or languages or things like that. Our drop-in center is a very unique asset to the community, an opportunity for parents who need someone to watch their young children for a very short period of time during the day, often so that they can go off and do volunteer work in the community. And it's one of the things that's wonderful about our community is there's a true volunteer spirit that's present throughout. And having the drop-in center in the center of town at Gorton provides these people the opportunity to let somebody in a state licensed facility watch their children where they can go off and help the rest of the community. It's a wonderful thing. And then all kinds of performing arts events. We have presentations, plays, community plays, performances. One other thing, and I didn't put it on the list, but we also offer a place for events. And those could be business meetings, civic meetings, performances, family events. We have weddings that are there, parties that are there. We have rooms that people can rent on a daily basis. We have things like the Allendale Boutique. LDA, Learning Disability Group, is there. So lots of activity takes place at Gorton. One thing that's very important that we want to make sure, we want to emphasize to the community, is that Gorton is one of the few community houses in the entire United States that's privately funded. There are no tax dollars used to support the operations of the Gorton Community Center. It is supported, the operations are supported entirely by the user fees and donations. And I think that's a critical thing that people need to keep in mind. And it's really a treasure when you look at how long we've been in operation there. I'll talk about it in a few minutes. This is our 35th year, and we've survived all that time with those two sources of revenue. We provide innovative programming that serves the community. We will seek out, solicit input from the community on things that they're interested in. We'll try new programs. Some work and are popular, some aren't popular, and we put them aside and try other things. But there's always something new that's happening at Gorton. We also have a large amount of our space that we dedicate to not-for-profit organizations. And they're able to have their offices there, the Volunteer Bureau, LEAD, GLASA, Mother's Trust, and there's more. We also provide administrative support for those organizations because obviously they don't have the ability to have complete staffs themselves, so we support them. And this is done, here we say affordable space. These are at below market rates for rentals because the reality is in Lake Forest, rental rates for office space is high. It's a competitive marketplace. For nonprofits, we basically subsidize that activity to give them an opportunity to have a place to work. And then we have our performing and cultural arts events that take place throughout the year. And that's been happening for 35 years. That's how long Gorton has been open. And one of the main reasons that we've been able to stay open for 35 years, in addition to how I said we've had the support of the community from donations and the user fees of the users, is the Friends of Gorton. And this is one of the main organizations that supports Gorton through their fundraising activities. And they have an annual event called A Small Dance for a Big Cause. And I know I've seen a number of faces here and council members who have attended that dance. It's an annual, this is in this June, our 35th anniversary of that event. And the Friends of Gorton collectively over those years have raised close to $3 million to support the operations of Gorton. So they're a wonderful organization. They do a tremendous benefit to us and thus the community. The dance this year will be at the end of June. There'll be announcements coming out in the next few months to give people some warning to pick a date to put on their calendar. It'll be our 35th anniversary gala. It's an elegant evening, as we like to say. So we'd like the community to keep that in mind also as they make their plans going forward. One of the keys about Gorton is what we call community involvement. And we support all ages in the community. We support all the people of the community. We support all different interests that take place in the community. Community members are participants. Community members are volunteers. It may not be real easy to see that is Jackie Smith's picture there in the center. Jackie and her husband Brooks, who I think most people know, were some of the original founders of Gorton 35 years ago. And we still have other members on our board. Jackie's on our board, other members on our board, and other members in the community who have been with us for 35 years and supported us for that time. And it's that level of community support, the love for the Gorton Center, and the love to make Lake Forest the place that it is, that really makes us go. So it's a wonderful thing. And then this year, I'll say this year because it's actually next year, in the next few months, we've got one other significant anniversary coming up, and that is the 20th anniversary of an event we have that's called Cabin Fever Jazz, which is very unique. It's the longest running jazz performance series on the North Shore. And if you're a fan of jazz music, I'm sure you've been to one of these and I'm sure you know about it because it's actually become very well known within the jazz community in the Chicago area. We have world-class performers that come in. This is not amateurs. These are paid musicians. Last year there was over 70 different musicians that came in as part of the series and performed at Gorton. It's a Sunday afternoon. It's in the winter, thus the name Cabin Fever. It's in a unique cabaret setting. This year, I think because of some of the bigger names we've got coming in, we're going to move a few of them to the auditorium. But typically, in the community room, small tables, the musicians are right in front of you, and it's a very intimate setting, which is very, very unique anywhere, but certainly for something like a community house. We cover all the different styles of jazz, whether you like ragtime, modern jazz, traditional jazz, there's something for everybody during that series. And another unique thing that we offer back to the community is what we call this educational outreach. We've gotten grants where some of the performers take time and then go to the high school and work with high school students and teach them jazz techniques and help them become musicians as they've now become themselves. And that's very unique. In addition, students get discounts to the tickets at the Jazz Series. So it's a way to get the students in the community involved. And then the significant thing that's happening to celebrate, to culminate the 20 years, is a gala concert on April 4th with the famed musician Kurt Elling. And if you know jazz, you've heard that name. He's a 7-time Grammy nominee. It's a Sunday afternoon. He's coming in with his professional musician band. This is a man who tours the world. I think he's, if I remember the schedule, he's coming to us from, I want to say it's Asia, but we've seen his first quarter tour schedule, and he is literally touring the world. And it's kind of nice now to look at that schedule online and see Gorton Center for the Performing Arts, Lake Forest, Illinois, on there. So either by going to our website or by waiting in a few weeks, we've got our new program book coming out. There'll be information available on this upcoming performance that we're all very excited about. And after having gone through 35 years, we think we have one of the premier community centers in the entire nation. We're looking forward to the next 35. So thank you very much for your time.
Thank you, Dick. Gorton is truly one of the gems of our community, as we have with Ragdale and others, and the tireless efforts of all your, especially the foundation and the people that work there. Gail, who runs it, it's just a spectacular effort and a great asset to our community. So thank you for everything that you do. Okay. We're off to comments by council members. Anyone have any comments?
Yes. On behalf of the Lake Forest Housing Trust, I'd like to announce that the City of Lake Forest will be conducting a forum on workforce housing this coming Friday, December 7th, from 9:30 to 11 a.m. at Lake Forest College, the Glen Rowan House. Lake Forest employers have been invited to participate in this event, and we look forward to reporting back to the community on the ideas, strategies, and initiatives that are discussed at this event.
I'd like to just comment that Alderman Haddad and I attended last Friday the groundbreaking for the tollway north entrance to go north out of Conway Office Park, and it's well underway, and it'll be a great thing to have happen to get that traffic off of 60 during the construction. So.
Hearing no other comments, I'll move on to council committee reports. Finance Committee report, Alderman Grumhouse.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. The Finance Committee met earlier this evening. The key discussion this evening was around the capital equipment expenditure plan for fiscal year 2009. We also have 3 items on the City Council agenda this evening, all of which are ordinances that need to be passed annually to essentially fund the city's operating budget. Each of these items were discussed previously at the Finance Committee and City Council meetings on November 19th. The first item is consideration of an ordinance approving a fee schedule for the City of Lake Forest. We talked through these fees, as I said, at the Finance Committee meeting, and if I don't hear any no questions, I'd like to get a motion to grant final approval.
So moved.
Second.
Roll call vote, please.
Alderman Swarthout?
Aye.
Alderman Grumhouse?
Aye.
Alderman Widman?
Aye.
Alderman Morsch?
Aye.
Alderman Hanrahan?
Aye.
Alderman Luby?
Aye.
Alderman Haddad?
Aye.
7 yeas, no nays, the motion carries.
Thank you. The second ordinance establishes the tax levy for 2007. The annual tax levy must be filed with the county clerk before the last Tuesday in December and includes all city departments, pension funds, debt service requirement, as well as District 67. The proposed tax levy for 2007 reflects a 2.99% increase over the 2006 tax levy. And the average increase to existing residents will be approximately 1.89%, or $47 on an $850,000 home. Again, if there are no questions, I'd like to get a motion to grant final approval of the proposed tax levy.
So moved.
Second. Roll call vote, please.
Alderman Swarthout?
Aye.
Alderman Grumhouse?
Aye.
Alderman Widman?
Aye.
Alderman Morsch?
Aye.
Alderman Hanrahan?
Aye.
Alderman Luby?
Aye.
Alderman Haddad?
Aye.
7 yeas, no nays, the motion carries.
Thank you. The last item on the agenda are a series of ordinance providing for the abatement of the 2007 taxes levied for various outstanding general obligation alternate revenue bond issues. Again, discussed previously, and if there are no questions, I will take a motion to grant final approval of the ordinances abating tax levies.
So moved.
Second.
Roll call vote, please.
Alderman Swarthout.
Aye.
Alderman Grumhouse.
Aye.
Alderman Widman.
Aye.
Alderman Morsch.
Aye.
Alderman Hanrahan.
Aye.
Alderman Luby.
Aye.
Alderman Haddad.
Aye.
7 yeas, no nays, the motion carries.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. That's all on the Finance Committee for tonight.
This is an opportunity for the public to address the council on any non-agenda items. Hearing none, we'll move on to the consent agenda. First item on the consent agenda is approval of the minutes of the December 19th regular council meeting, and I believe we had a corrected version at our desk, correct?
Yes.
Any additions, corrections, or alterations to those corrected agenda minutes?
Motion to accept?
No, no, no.
Oh, get the whole.
Second item on the agenda, David.
Approval of authorized invoices and payrolls for the month of November totaling $1,738,461.82. And then also authorization of treasurer's warrants to meet expenses of December 2007.
Sort of like Bobby Seals, we'll have to bound and gag him till the appropriate moment.
So moved.
Second.
Roll call vote, please.
Alderman Swarthout.
Aye.
Alderman Grumhouse.
Aye.
Alderman Widman.
Aye.
Alderman Morsch.
Aye.
Alderman Hanrahan.
Aye.
Alderman Luby.
Aye.
Alderman Haddad.
Aye.
7 yeas, no nays, the motion carries.
The next item on the agenda is ordinances, and under the first ordinance is a consideration of a final approval of plat of subdivision for Landmark. I believe we are working with the petitioner to come to a final conclusion on some of the things that have come out of our discussion, and I think we have moved in a positive direction. He has asked for it to be pulled off the agenda for tonight so that he can bring it back with the final resolution to all the outstanding items on the first meeting in January. Is that correct, Ms. Cerniak? Okay. So we will.
So, Mr. Mayor, you don't want any comments on these two items that were listed here? I was somewhat concerned about some of the language that was here, and I assumed then the petitioner had some concern, and therefore it was pulled. But I thought the intent was to try to work with the petitioner to make sure that we're guaranteed that that house gets rehabbed and still allow the petitioner to move forward to try to recoup his losses, which I think will be huge on that historic house.
And absolutely, that is the direction we're taking. We've been exchanging some ideas and options
Okay,
along that.
okay.
And they've just asked for the 30 days because they have to talk to lenders and other people.
Great.
The consideration, Tom, is to have that as the ultimate goal, is how we can achieve that
Yeah.
in the most efficient way. The next item is a consideration of a report and recommendation from the Plan Commission in support of a tentative subdivision and plat approval for the Barat Woods development. Tonight, the City Council is continuing its review of the Barat Woods development. The matter of the Tabor Wing will not be discussed this evening, as the City Council has already approved its demolition. We must continue to follow our normal course of reviewing first the tentative phase of the proposed subdivision, which we will do tonight, and then, after final engineering plans and various documents have been completed, review the final plat. City Council's focus tonight is on the overall site plan, the density, traffic circulation, and other technical and aesthetic aspects of the plan. As many residents might be aware, a lawsuit has been filed by Landmarks Illinois with respect to the demolition of the Tabor Wing. They may also be aware that last week the court denied the city's motion to dismiss the lawsuit. City Council is working with the city attorney and the city's legal committee and will determine how to best respond to that ruling. In the meantime, we will continue to process this petition based on the conceptual approvals granted by the City Council last spring. Given that, I ask that all testimony be focused on the matters before the City Council tonight. And then I will turn it over to Ms. Cerniak to make her presentation.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor, members of the council. This is really an interim opportunity for the city council to review the progress that's been made to date on Barat Woods. You did, as the mayor mentioned, see this development last April or May. At that time, you did approve a tentative development plan ordinance. You didn't give You didn't take official action on the subdivision plat. So this is an interim step. Last week, the Plan Commission spent 3.5 hours reviewing this matter and did recommend to you unanimously approval of the tentative plat. They have a number of recommended conditions of approval that you received in under separate cover materials. Altogether, the Plan Commission has now reviewed this project on 4 separate occasions and has spent approximately 14 hours in discussions, hearing public testimony, and hearing presentations on this matter. You do have a copy of the tentative plat of subdivision in your packet, and importantly, the tentative plat identifies the lots within which the various buildings will be constructed. The exact building footprint, building heights, building design are not before you tonight for approval. With approval of the tentative plat, if you should choose to grant such a motion tonight, that will allow staff to work with the petitioner to finalize the engineering, landscape plans, and various other documents that need to be finalized before we're in a position to bring this back to the Plan Commission and then to you for final approval before we can record the plat. Although what is before you tonight is the tentative plat, it really is much easier for you to actually look at the site plan to really envision what is proposed for the property. Since March, the plan has been refined, although the overall plan appears fairly consistent. City engineering staff have reviewed, I believe, 4 different sets of engineering plans. There's been significant progress made on the part of the developer's team to refine those plans. In particular, the changes made respond to concerns that both the Plan Commission and City Council raised when you saw this last spring. Areas where key changes were made, this front building, City Council identified the mass of this building, the location of this building as a concern. This building has been reduced in size and has been pulled off of the triangle piece that is property and right-of-way that's in the city ownership. So on the revised site plan that I just had up, this building no longer encroaches onto this front parcel. Each of the plan commissioners did walk the site, some in cold, rainy weather, because I walked it with them. And the site is very clearly marked with stakes that illustrate both the streets as well as the corners of the various lots. And the Plan Commission was unanimous in their feeling that with the adjustment of this building, as they stood at the corner of that building and looked at both the approach from Wesley Road and Sheridan Road, they felt very comfortable that the relocation of that building really did address the concern that they had about the potential for this building to be too prominent when viewed from those streetscapes. A second significant change is that since your last meeting, the petitioner has worked with Woodlands Academy and has a contract to acquire this piece here in the corner. The concern previously was that this very irregular property line really made the development of buildings in this area difficult. This property totals just about half an acre and allows appropriate land area for these buildings to function, and 2 additional lots have been created back in that area. However, there is no increase in density that results from those lots. You may recall that as we talked about this project before, talking about an overall number of units, as we might do with a Thorndale subdivision, really you're talking about apples and oranges, because with respect to this project, we're really looking at, is the overall layout appropriate? Do the building footprints, the lot layouts provide for the appropriate massing, the appropriate areas of open space, appropriate building clusters? And it's less important whether as part of the developer's market study, whether there's 6 units in this particular building or 3 larger units. So the Plan Commission followed that line of thinking in their discussions this last meeting. Other changes that have been made, both of these buildings have been adjusted, the lots on which they would be located, to pull them out of the areas that are impacted by the steep slope setback from the ravines. So those are the key changes. There's been many other adjustments to location of the bridge, the alignment of the road, but I won't go through all of those unless you have questions. I did want to take a moment. You do have detailed conditions in front of you from the Plan Commission. I wanted to just highlight the key conditions that they're recommending that you approve. With respect to density, you may recall that last spring, the Plan Commission spent a great deal of time talking about density, and ultimately recommended to you that a density approximating the density that's permitted in the Northmore subdivision be permitted in this area. At last week's meeting, that density, that overall density, did come down a bit. In the R1 district, which covers the Northmore neighborhood, 4.6 units per acre are permitted. When this came to you in March, that was the number. The Plan Commission last week adjusted that to say that 3 to 3.6 units per acre should be permitted in the areas where new development is to occur. The Plan Commission recognized that Old Main is what it is, and in order to make it feasible to preserve that building and adaptively reuse it, whether there's 42 units in it or 50 units in it really doesn't affect the overall density. It doesn't affect the overall amount of open space on the site, building footprint coverage. So with this, as I walk through here, you'll see that density is approached from several different angles. But overall, the density is not to exceed the 3.6 units per acre. That is 1 unit less than the Northmore neighborhood. There's a requirement that at least 45 units on the site be in Old Main.
Kathy?
Yes.
Does the 45, are the 45 units in Old Main included in the calculation of the units per acre density?
They are not included in this calculation. This calculation is for the new development.
Okay.
The 45 units are included in the maximum 120 units. So that's why you see density wasn't just a simple equation in the case of this development, and that's why you have a series of parameters that would all have to be met. Total building footprint coverage, including Old Main and all of the new buildings, could not exceed 20% of the site. In the Northmore neighborhood, building footprints could go up to 30% coverage of the site. So again, this has been ratcheted down from what will be permitted in the adjacent R1 district.
Kathy, I hate to interrupt you, but going to the Villa Caturicum area, what would the density or what would the percentage be? Just give me a rough idea.
Villa Turicum is R3. That would be 1 unit per acre.
I understand that, but I'm saying coverage is what I was looking for, the 20%.
I don't know that number off the top of my head for the R3 district. But the point you raised, this is a very unique lot in that probably unlike any other lot in the city, it's bordered by R1 development, R2 development, R3 development, I believe R4 development, and open space, as well as a special use, the adjacent Woodlands Academy. So it's really a very unique parcel. The Plan Commission did continue to have discussion about the buildings that would be on lots 15, 16, and 17. Those are the lots immediately behind Old Main. They continued to want to think through, is the location of those buildings appropriate? Is there enough distance clearance between Old Main and the nearest elevation, the nearest wall of those buildings? Is the height appropriate? The developer did provide some very good graphic information that we'll continue to work through. but the Plan Commission will be looking at this issue again as we bring it back for final consideration. And finally, a minimum 30-foot separation distance between buildings, just for comparison purposes, although it's a very different development. In the Willow Lake Farm development on the Fitzmaurice property, the required separation distance between buildings in that case was 20 feet, so this would be greater than that. Another key issue that's addressed by the recommended conditions of approval are the city parcels. The City Council talked about those parcels, both the 2.8 wooded parcel between Barat and South Park and the triangle piece that I mentioned a moment ago. Bottom line for the Plan Commission, they feel that the wooded parcel should be preserved in perpetuity by a conservation easement. Whether that property remains in the city's ownership and a conservation easement is placed on it, whether it's transferred in some equitable manner to Barat Woods and a conservation easement is placed on it, that was less of a concern, more of a concern that given the density, given the fact that Barat Woods is developing, it is important to preserve that area as a passive area and to ensure that some future city council doesn't decide to develop it with 24 acres. So their recommendation to you is to ensure that it's preserved through a conservation easement. Tonight I look for direction from you as we move into the final phase. Do you want us to continue to explore ways that this might be transferred to the developer, or are you comfortable retaining city ownership with a conservation easement on that property if you support this condition? The triangle parcel, again, the primary concern for the Plan Commission was that no structures be located on this parcel, recognizing that would it be appropriate for it to be maintained in a manner similar to the overall Barat Woods development, and third, to ensure that there is public access through this property to allow connection to the bike path. Again, less important who actually owns it. In this case, it may make some real sense to allow this property to be transferred, become part of Barat Woods, and become the Barat Woods Homeowners Association's responsibility to maintain this parcel. There are various conditions related to access. I don't know that I need to go through those in detail. The key determination you made in the spring was that there would be no street access, no vehicle access from Barat Woods through the wooded parcel to South Park in the neighborhood, in the Northmore neighborhood. That there would be public access in a very natural way through the woods, but to recognize that there would be access on natural paths of some kind. A new condition that I believe came out of the discussion of the City Council was that as part of this development, given that there will be a joint access that will ultimately be developed that Woodlands and Barat will share to avoid those two accesses in very close proximity, is that in addition to that, that there would be an improved pedestrian crossing on Sheridan Road from Villa Turicum to Woodlands and Barat properties. Currently, that pedestrian pathway, I believe, crosses at an angle. Pedestrians are exposed to the street for quite a distance. And I believe that was a particular concern of Alderman Elliott, so that has been incorporated. I believe the rest of those conditions are ones that you are familiar with.
Can I just ask you on that connection, you're looking at having Woodlands and Barat Woods have the same entrance in, and Barat's is going to come off of that? I mean, Woodlands is going to come off? Where those two entrances are together right now, are you going to move that into one?
This is the proposed, and you're right, the current Woodlands access is, the driveway is just about on that corner,
Right.
on that curve, I mean.
That's
And then
correct.
this access is slightly
Just
further
right-
to the north.
It's right next to it, yeah.
So we're pulling both of those as far as we can to keep an appropriate distance between the two driveways, pulling those together and combining those. But as this goes in, Woodlands will maintain a very separate, distinct entrance into Woodlands Academy. That was a concern early on.
Are they going to get a bridge then, or? I mean, the ravine is like right there between the two properties.
No, I don't think so.
It's a
First time you've ever been wrong. No, I don't think so.
I think the ravine is back in this area, but
Yeah.
this,
There's nothing
this
there.
adjustment here
Okay.
won't require an additional bridge.
Okay.
And then the pedestrian crossing I talked about was out in this area.
Right.
And then just to move on to a couple key issues the Plan Commission also discussed. Although parking on the site wasn't discussed during the conceptual discussion, it is an issue that was raised during tentative discussion by the Plan Commission. And there is a balance. Obviously, visitors are going to come into this site, they need a place to park. There is adequate garage spaces based on our code requirement for all of the proposed units. It's the on-street parking that we really need to give more thought to. Police and fire have been involved in those discussions. We know that with Lake Forest Place, after it was constructed, we had a situation where there were actually more cars on that site than we had originally anticipated, and there is some difficulty getting around curves. So with that, the Plan Commission is recommending a condition that really directs us to go back, continue to work with the petitioner to develop a parking plan. Work with both engineering, police, and fire. We expect that they will ask that there be no parking on bridges, on curves, or close to corners. The Plan Commission, for aesthetic reasons, looked at elimination of parking in front of Old Main. There has historically been parking in front of Old Main, and we'll look at that carefully to try and balance both aesthetic and practical needs. Talked about, in attempting to ensure that there is parking only in specified areas and not in areas that might impede emergency access, actually looking at ways to designate parking spaces, whether that's markings on the street or signage. Looking at the possibility, are there some areas on this site where there could be a few off-street pull-out spaces without compromising the overall green space concept? And then finally, the enforcement mechanism. Since these will be private streets, city police will not be patrolling or ticketing. So those are some issues we will need to work through and bring a solution back as part of final approval. And finally,
Kathy, how many parking units are there, or parking spaces per unit?
it depends on the unit type. Many of the units have 2 spaces. The affordable units will have 1 space. So it varies, and again, some of that is still being worked out based on the size of units and ultimate number of units. But the units themselves, at least based on our code requirements, do meet those requirements. But obviously, we want to work through this enough to be sure that not only the code requirements are met, but to ensure that perhaps there's even a safety margin to ensure that there's adequate parking. Finally, you have a number of conditions included there that I'm not going over. Those are very standard condition that talks about review and approval by various city staff and the city attorney. But key discussion points for the Plan Commission, a mechanism to assure that the restoration, alteration, and conversion of Old Main to condominium units happens in a time frame that is acceptable to the City Council. We will work with the city attorney, and in the final development plan ordinance that we bring to you, there will be language that guarantees restoration of Old Main. Certainly, the Plan Commission was concerned that, not unlike the subdivision that was on your agenda earlier tonight, that the development approvals don't get granted and then the commitment is not being followed through, and that's what we have the city attorney for. And then finally, much like we did with Amberley Woods, requirements and conditions that will need to be satisfied if, in fact, any portion of the Barat Woods development is transferred to another party before it is fully built out. Again, we did that with Amberley Woods. We've actually gone through that process. I believe transferee assumption agreement was the actual document that controlled those. So that is a quick review of the various conditions of approval. The Plan Commission does recommend that you approve tentative plat and allow us to move forward, this will come back before the Plan Commission and back before you for final approval. I would be happy to answer any questions.
Kathy, first of all, I'd like to thank all the boards and commissions for the amount of hours they have spent on this petition. Both the HPC and the Plan Commission have certainly spent hours looking out for what's best for the community, and I want to thank them for doing that. I also think the banter back and forth between the council and the committees to bounce ideas off each other is very important and helpful, because we may be looking at things a little differently than they do. So that, having said that, you asked a question which I'm going to take a first swing at here, and you said, what about the triangle piece in Barat? And my question to you is, in all of this, I just saw one mention, if you will, of a conservation easement shall be placed on the south front lawn of Old Main. Now, I know there's a number of discussions whether that land was going to be given to open lands, whether this is going to be owned by the association and therefore part of the association. I think before, certainly I'm ready to make a thought process as to what to do with this property. I'd like to know what our options are, because certainly giving it to open lands and having it dedicated as open space and having open lands taking care of it means that the public is welcome on the property. And saying that there's a conservation easement and this is part of Barry Woods may have a different connotation to the public, if you will. And so having a bike path through the Barrow Woods conservation easement may have a different connotation to the public than, oh, that's part of open lands, and I'm just picking on open lands, or the city's bike path into this area. So I am somewhat concerned about that issue, and think we need to work our way through that, and especially in the back piece, as you said, gee, what are we going to do with the back piece? If you put a conservation easement on it and Barrow Woods puts a fence up and says, yeah, well, nothing's going to be built on it, but you can't come in here either, I don't know that we've achieved our goal. So I have some concerns about that specific issue.
With respect to the wooded parcel, the Plan Commission's recommendation is that a conservation easement be placed on the property to assure that nothing is ever built on it, and to assure that it is maintained in an appropriate, an environmentally sensitive way, removing buckthorn, cleaning out some of the rubbish that's in that area right now. The intent, the recommendation from the Plan Commission is that whether or not it remains in city ownership or is transferred to Barrow Woods, that there would be a pedestrian access preserved through that wooded parcel. Certainly your point that if it remains in city ownership, it may have the appearance of being more open to the public. That certainly is a valid issue. If in fact, it will need to be maintained, whether it's in city ownership or whether it's in the ownership of Barrow Woods. With respect to the front lawn, and I didn't mention the condition, but there is a condition that says that as part of the final plat, a conservation easement shall be put on the front lawn. That parcel is in the ownership of Barrow Woods and would remain in the ownership and be the responsibility of the homeowners association. So there wouldn't necessarily, as has been discussed to date, there wouldn't be any public access to that. It would simply be a conservation easement to preserve that area as open space.
So that is a little change from what we've originally may have heard, and I'm talking maybe a year or two ago, where this was going to become a property of open lands and they were going to maintain it and keep this property going, that front lawn.
A conservation easement can be placed on property, and the holder of an easement could be Nature Conservancy, it could be open lands, doesn't necessarily mean the entire
Or it could
property.
be Barrow Woods themselves. Correct.
Well, one of the things, just when we talk about Barrow Woods, there are going to be various associations.
Right.
So what we're going to want to do is, I would ask that the city attorney follow up to make sure that the documentation articulate what, do we care what association is going to be responsible?
So that's my point, is that you're asking me to give away a piece of property to an unnamed association at this point. I'm a little uncomfortable with who they are and what they're going to do, so I would like to see that better defined when this comes back.
And let me just clarify, on some of our subdivisions, we have conservation areas, which is a term defined in our tree preservation ordinance. That simply means the property continues under the responsibility of the homeowners association or an individual homeowner. It just requires that in order to do any removal of vegetation, they need to come to the city to get a permit. A conservation easement is something different, and I will ask the city attorney to detail that.
The conservation easement is something that's going to be both enforceable and leading to benefits to the named entity. For example, it may be held by Barrow Woods LLC or by the association, as it may be, but it's going to go to the benefit of, say, the city of Lake Forest or Lake Forest Open Lands or whatever entity is so identified. It will be then both a restriction on the title, but also have enforcement by others who may not be within the city. Whereas with our conservation area in the tree ordinance, that's something that's really enforceable by the city in and of itself. It may show up on the plat as an area, but it's not going to have quite the same legal impact as the conservation easement that's being described here.
What does that mean in terms of a family from outside of Barrow Woods deciding to throw down a picnic blanket in the area in front of Old Main on some Sunday afternoon under a big old tree, whether it's conservation easement or conservation area? Is that something that a resident...
It would depend very much on what the precise terms are, and I don't know that we've gotten to that fine a point in any kind of discussions on it. My guess would be that we would not want to be discouraging that, since that's an historic use there, but there may be some limitations on that type of use.
And I guess
think
my
that was your
concern is
point.
more to the bicycle path coming off of the bicycle path onto Barat that's always been there. I don't want it all of a sudden to be, that's the Barrow Woods or the Hoochie Coochie's bicycle path, and you can't, you don't feel as free to go on it as you have in the past. The other thing, Kathy, is that I feel semi-guilty about the first issue tonight, which we've postponed for, since I was the one who brought it up. But I do believe that we have to look at this petition at the same standard as we looked at the petition previous tonight, and to make sure that the old main building, however we have assurances, gets renovated in a timely manner compared to the other buildings that are going to be built on the site. I would hate to have 70 townhomes in the back and Old Main sitting there saying, well, gee, I'm sorry, we're just not going to get to this one. I would want something in there to say that we are going to get the same satisfaction or end result that we were looking for with the first petition tonight.
And that very clearly describes the intent of the Plan Commission, and I would expect that the city attorney would be working with the petitioner's attorney to develop that language and get that in final form before we bring it back to you.
I'm sorry to monopolize questions, please.
No.
I just
Go ahead.
had a quick question on the inclusionary zoning ordinance. We've had extensive discussions on that issue with respect to this, overall project. I think it's imperative that as part of any tentative approval that we feel comfortable that there is adequate verbiage about potentially how that's going to be satisfied, and if there's going to be a payment in lieu, what the timing of that payment's going to be.
And the Housing Trust is going to be seeing, I believe, a week from Friday, a more developed plan. So we didn't reiterate the details of that in the tentative approval, but the Plan Commission is aware that 8 to 10 units of affordable housing will be incorporated on the site, and then based on the direction of the Housing Trust, I would expect the Housing Trust would forward a recommendation to the City Council to be considered concurrently with final approval. So that will all be incorporated together, but we can certainly add a condition making that point.
I might want to add at this point, and serving on the Housing Trust with Alderman Haddad, I think the developer's done a very good job of trying to comply with and live with the spirit of that ordinance. So I would applaud him at this point in time for making great efforts, and I know we have a few other details to work out, but that would all come before council at some point in the future. So,
Yeah, Kathy, I did have a couple questions I wanted to follow up on, and I also concur with Mr. Mayor on the overall progress and the success of this project. I think it's a phenomenal land plan. I have to compliment the architect. I think it's great, and I was a little reluctant to move forward with the Tabor wing until I saw this land plan and understand the concept, and I think it's really, it's going to be spectacular. I have some concerns, though, and I kind of use Port Sheridan as an example. Multiple developers got involved in that development, and I know that scale is really kind of not to the same size, but Mr. Shaw will do an outstanding job, but I don't know about the next guy. And you see real quality differences within Port Sheridan. So I would have a concern about that. Secondly, the ravine restoration that Fort Sheridan did, I thought was pretty unique. And this restoration right in the middle, as the ravine cuts through, will that be restored to its original grade? I know there's a bridge that runs through the middle of the alley there. Will that ravine grade continue? Will they excavate where the old ravine was filled?
Let me start at one end. Is this the area you're speaking of?
Well, well, they connect, obviously, but in the center there, yes, right there, there's a ravine that exists now, and then it's filled through the parking lot. Does that get excavated out?
Let me start at this end.
Okay.
There's a very shallow area right in this area that is already disconnected from the rest of the ravine and really doesn't contribute to the overall storm drainage system. This will be filled. It's really, in part, this Crescent building is located there. This will be filled. There'll be some rain gardens created in this area to address some water quality issues. And then, yes, the ravine, as it winds through, there will be a bridge in this area and a second bridge in this area. This leg of the road and this leg of the road really are on the tableland that already exists. But the ravine from here through the site, the engineering is working with the developer. There will be restoration improvements as needed. There will be focus on improved water quality. And importantly, it wasn't an earlier condition, but the overall amount of impervious surface that will result at the end of this project will be less than existed on the site before all the buildings were taken down with the original campus.
Okay.
So there will be restoration done. In the end, we'll have a ravine that's better than it is now.
Okay. The easement will there be a new easement created to go through Sacred Heart, Woodlands Academy, as the newer property that's being acquired there? If one was to leave a dinner party, could they leave through the campus, or will that be just an emergency access only?
The old road connection
Yeah, it kinda
is
winds
right in
through,
here.
yeah,
That will be
yeah.
eliminated. And yes, the connection will be moved up here. From an emergency access standpoint, that was a requirement. We weren't going to have any access through up here, but this access to Woodlands would need to remain. And one of the conditions does address that. That is something that we need to give further consideration to. That has been talked about as a one-way. Ideally, emergency services would like that to be an ungated
Yeah, I don't
rather
have-
than
I
emergency
guess I
gate,
don't have
but
a-
it's envisioned as a one-way coming from Woodlands into Barat.
Okay.
So,
I was just, during the, in the afternoon, 3:15, and, it was just easier to cut through there. You would have a number of residents leaving through the campus of Woodlands, and I think that perhaps might be problematic.
and that's something we want to avoid, whether that's through gates, signage, limited access. We haven't resolved that yet.
And then two other comments, just comments only. The south lawn, I think that's terrific, and whether it's a conservation easement and it's controlled by Barat, I think they're entitled to that. I would sure love not to see any obstructions that would block the view in the future. A homeowners association in the future would say, you know what, we just don't want to see all that traffic going down Sheridan Road and put up a 6-foot stockade fence, and, that would be horrible. And even an iron traditional fence, I think, would be unfortunate. So I would really like to see that all open without any fencing between. And finally, I mean, everybody knows my position. I just can't support it if the Barrow Woods or the woods at the park are incorporated into this development. I would certainly want to have city ownership and control of that property for some future council or a conservation easement. I'm even fine with that. But I'd really like to see the city maintain that control.
Kath, I had just a question. First of all, as the vision becomes more defined, it certainly is very delightful to see it. And it also convinces me even more that the processes that we've set up in the city work so very well to mesh the goals of the city and the goals of a property owner. So just with that little backdrop, I have a question. At what point in the process will the HPC get involved to actually look at the designs of the respective buildings and the frontages and so on? There are a lot of units here. I'm a little concerned and hope we're not going in the direction that there's going to be total homogeneity of design here, because I think it would look much better if there's some variety. But at what point does the HPC get in to weigh in on that?
Since you last saw this in spring, the Historic Preservation Commission has seen this overall plan, specifics on the building, landscaping, bridges, various elements on 2 or 3 occasions. So they have already reviewed the conceptual design, certainly with input from the Plan Commission with respect to the massing of these units. Any input from you, they will continue to review these buildings. They will, I don't know the timing for when they will be presented with plans for final approval, but I believe some of that will run concurrently as we begin to see some improvements on the site, assuming final approval of this in the first quarter. The Historic Preservation Commission did look at fairly detailed plans for each of the building types. I think with respect to homogeneity, there certainly all of the design plays off the elements of Old Main. The massing of the buildings are very different. You have massings that step down as you move toward the north end of the site. You also have a very unique building with the Crescent Building that's proposed. But certainly, if you want to provide any direction to the commission as they continue to look at the building designs, now would be an appropriate place to do that.
Well, I mean, it's just my thinking. I see that, you know, one could look at this as a total package. One could look at it as a group, as a collection of clusters of buildings that seem to maybe 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 separate clusters. There's a number of ways to break it up, but the concept I'm talking about is just not having too much of one look-alike kind of structure throughout the entire system. I mean, I can't give you any more direction than that or thought than that. Yeah.
Kathy, I have a couple questions. First of all, it's just, again, a tremendous job, and being one that was on the original committee and watching this go through the process, it's been tremendous. There were a couple things. I just want to go back to the woods again, because the Northmore neighbors were so adamant and vocal and brought up some very good points in the Plan Commission's meetings that I attended about the issue of maintaining it, no matter who the owner was. You know, if I went out there, I'd probably cut down everything that was really nice and should be staying up there, because I don't know what should stay and what should go. And I think that was the real issue. And has that been tackled, or is that going to be addressed even more depending on how it works out?
It will be addressed more, and I think tonight we do want direction from the City Council. Number one, should the city retain ownership, and I'm speaking specifically of the woods, or do you want it under Barrow Woods control? The Plan Commission knew that that was your purview and didn't weigh in on that at all, but they were really emphatic that this area needs to have a conservation easement placed on it to protect it in perpetuity, to acknowledge that this is open space and that it should be maintained by someone other than you who knows what they're doing. So
Right.
the right tree should be preserved. And there were early discussions with Open Lands. They expressed an interest in accepting a conservation easement for this. They would do the maintenance. Obviously, they're not going to do the maintenance for free, whether it's the city paying it as part of our master lease or whether it would be one of the association groups or the master association group. But I think what you're expressing is exactly what the Plan Commission said. Given the density in Barrow Woods, we feel this area should remain wooded. There should be certainty, both for the Northmore neighbors and for the Barrow Woods future residents, that some future city council isn't going to come in and say, what a great place for 24 more units.
Okay. Then my last question, again, a vocal group, was Woodlands. In terms of, during the process that I was on the Plan Commission, there wasn't a lot of dialogue between Mr. Shaw and Woodlands, like the water hookup and some other issues. Has that all been resolved?
It has. In fact, since you last saw this, there has been a completely new water main extended to serve Woodlands Academy. That water main ends in this area and will ultimately be extended. But there was great cooperation on that, agreement on the joint entrance, obviously agreement to sell that portion of property. So I believe that relationship has really proved to be a benefit to both parties.
So Woodlands is happy with where it is right now and the group?
As far as I know, and they certainly are pleased with their new water main.
Great. Okay, thank you.
I would like to say the city should keep the property on the north end by the park. And I was on a committee when we bought that property from Barat to save it from development. And I would like to see it stay under city control and with the easement on that, the conservation easement. I also watched the Plan Commission the other night, and I thought they did an excellent job in going through the different issues, and one of the important ones was the parking issue. I applaud them for tackling that, and I know it's still under revision, but I look forward to seeing that studied and where it comes out. I think that was very important. And other than that, I think it's a very good plan.
I just wanted to weigh in on the city-owned parcels. The city of Chicago has successfully addressed how to maintain or, shall we say, address open space areas that are less than a certain size. And basically, if they are less than a certain size, they require the developer via a successor association to actually own and maintain the open space. However, there are restrictions that are recorded against the open space that would preclude any future development. So it's really not relevant who the owner of record is, but what are the restrictions that are placed upon it. So I just pass that along. But as a further follow-up with respect to the city, or the current city-owned parcels, there's reference in here that on the Triangle City parcel, that in the event it's transferred, that it's going to be done so in an equitable manner. So the question I've got for the city attorney is there a requirement that any transfer of municipal property be for consideration?
When we look at this entire development, well, let me back up. Yes, it must be for consideration. As to what that consideration is, it doesn't necessarily have to be on a dollar value. If there are other improvements that are going to be done throughout the development, that might be the offsetting consideration. But I don't think that discussion has advanced to the point that I can give you any meaningful response.
Any other comments? I just have,
I'm sorry. I was just going to speak to the ownership issue since everybody else did. I felt I should weigh in on it too. I'm not compelled to sell the properties simply because they're in current city ownership and they're acceptable the way they are. And I'm not even compelled to trade it for a conservation easement. I'm not sure why we need to do that and potentially limit future use, whatever that might be, whether it be conservation or adding on to the park or whatever the case may be. But I don't know if that has been an issue that's been brought to consideration here at the council level anyway. And that's the way I feel. I don't feel we've had a fulsome discussion of whether or not we should be selling the property. In terms of the property, I feel less concerned about the property adjacent to Wesley Road. However, I only would have concerns about the bike path and any other, quote, transportation-related uses, access, transportation, whatever that means. We don't know, what access we may need to the train tracks in the future. I just think we need to keep all rights that we currently have since we have ownership and make sure we don't trade those away. If they want to have a nice front lawn for their development, that's great, then they can do that, and they can maintain it, and they can enter into agreement with us to do that. So that'd be I don't think we have to give them ownership to do that.
I don't think I have a strong opinion either way on this. I think, maintenance of the parcel off Wesley Road is not something I think the city wants, because it's going to be an isolated parcel there, and it's just going to be an expense that we have to take care of. And so I would, whether it's a successor lease or whatever we set up, I think we should transfer the maintenance of that to Barat Woods. The back parcel I'm less concerned about, because obviously we're taking care of South Park, so, it's going to be right there. It's less of an access issue. But I don't feel strongly. I think there's certainly a case to be made on the back parcel that you want an easement and to sort of guarantee that you're going to have this forever. On the other hand, I do hate to handcuff future councils and put the word out there that we don't have, faith that they're going to do the right thing, and times change, and, there's probably not a reason to handcuff them. So, I think we should focus on maintenance of the front parcel and probably leave the other decisions alone.
Lest I remind the council, we just had a sidewalk that was torn out, so, this is the same sort of issue,
Right.
that if they have ownership, they can do what they want with it. We have ownership, we have control.
Right. The idea that we would, when they develop Villa Turicum, that somehow the developer would ask for a conservation easement on McCormick Park, seems like why are they dictating terms to the city? So I feel very comfortable the way it is. And I think, Tom, you make a very good point. Maybe we'll be decimated by some infectious disease for the trees, and it may give us an opportunity to put swing sets there. What may happen, we don't know. So, I think we've been a great job with stewards of that property up to now, and I think we can still maintain it in our inventory.
What concerns me is if we hand it over even on a conservation basis, then we have an expectation level that we're creating, and, it's going to come back to us to deal with. And why do we need to create that issue?
I just have one other issue that I want to bring up, and that is the density issue. And the only reason I wish to bring it up is that we have, as people know, received letters in both saying there should be much less units, and then at the same time I've received letters that there should be triple the units that we have here. So I want to say that the people who have spent the massive amount of hours and come up with this recommendation, I'm going to tend to go with their recommendation and think that they probably have this, rather than the person who said there should be 16 units on this property, and the person that said there should be 500 units, twin towers, and 20 stories tall. So I'm just going to go with I think I'd like to see us stay in this range unless anybody has any real objection to that issue.
I agree.
Any comment from?
I have one issue I neglected to put before you. I apologize.
Okay.
I just need your thoughts on this. The final issue that came up during conceptual discussion was whether or not a right turn lane should be added to the intersection of Wesley and Sheridan Road. At our request, the developer did some fairly extensive study looking at, certainly it can be done there. The right turn lane would allow, right now there's just a single lane, would allow obviously right turn movements onto Wesley without waiting for a red light. With all the intersection reconfigurations, the traffic signal relocation, replacement, ballpark would be about a $250,000 project. From the city engineer's perspective, from police, fire, warrants are not met to add a right turn lane here. At the peak use of Barat, there was more traffic using this intersection than there will ever be as a result of this development. The Plan Commission, a few of them said, gosh, I travel this area, I would sure like it, but on the other hand, the Plan Commission unanimously said, since the warrants aren't met, they didn't feel that a recommendation in support of this was appropriate. So this is an issue that was looked at. I just wanted to make you aware of it. It is not included as a condition intentionally because the Plan Commission backed away from it. So I would look for any thoughts you have on that.
I'd be happy to go on the record on this one. I think that's a bad idea. And the reason is because the traffic warrants do not suggest it. All it will do is add additional traffic, which was already diverting off of 41. It's diverting onto McKinley. It's on Green Bay. Now we can put it on Sheridan, and maybe the people in the neighborhood would hear about that. So I'm against it.
I'm seeing this for the first time, but I might take the opposite tact. I think it's a lousy corner. It backs up into that light because you're waiting for a left-hand turn lane, and the light going that direction turns for a much shorter amount of time. You have people all the time racing to try and beat the light to get through it. And, I haven't seen the traffic study and seen the traffic warrants, but, if you travel that road, you feel like it needs a right-hand turn lane. And I think certainly, the residents of Barat Woods would want a turn lane there. I don't know if there's been any discussions with Mr. Shaw about the possibility of splitting some sort of fund on this. But, I think it's something we should think hard about because it's a pretty narrow intersection and there is going to be a lot more increased traffic coming out, especially at certain times of the day.
I have to concur with David. I know this is, just outside our boundaries, but I have to tell you that I'm always mystified why people who travel through downtown Lake Forest don't escape the traffic bottleneck coming from the high school specifically. If you want to get to the other side of town, why you're not taking Sheridan Road to this location and going down Wesley to the other side of town, and it does back up, and this would really help relieve that if people understood how convenient using the back roads of Sheridan and going through the beautiful First Ward. But I think this is a great idea.
And into the beautiful Second Ward.
Second Ward, right.
You could maybe look at statistics before and after. I'm sure that's in the traffic study, and so
I think the
maybe there might be
engineers,
some enlightenment here.
yeah, and I think the engineer's concern is that this isn't like putting up a stop sign. I mean, this is a major expense, and we do have a similar situation at Everett and Waukegan, where we have residents asking for a right turn lane.
To the
And
minister's house?
Yeah, right next to
Right through his
St.
living room.
Patrick's. And again, it doesn't meet any of the warrants. It's really a convenience issue more than a safety consideration. So that's what we would just throw that out there to make sure you're looking at the big picture.
I also have a timing question, that is whether this is something that needs to be decided while the rest of the work is going on, or whether it is something that we can defer and see how things work out and maybe get back to it sometime later after we see what the traffic flows are.
You can certainly do that. I think the only question, though, is that, and I think the reason it was raised at the Plan Commission is this a cost we want to place on the developer versus the city of Lake Forest, so. Can I raise one other question?
I was
too?
just going to ask for comments from the public before we come back to final questions, because I have
Okay.
one myself. but
Okay, I'll let you ask. your
Any
final
comments from the public? Anyone have anything they wish to say? Okay, I'll turn it back here. Vic, my question is to you. As this goes along, when can, assuming now we're in the plat and now it goes back to the Plan Commission, when can a permit for demolition be issued as we go along here?
When the council first considered this, one of the conditions was that no demolition permit would be available until all of the other final approvals were in place. So once the rest of the process is completed and they are ready for final consideration by the council for the final development plan, with that in hand, the city would be in a position to issue a demolition permit as well as related building permits for this to continue.
So we're a couple bites away from that apple.
As I understand it, it's probably, I think, first quarter of '08 that we're likely to see this.
Any other questions by council members? Bob, you had one?
Nope, that was actually my question.
Well, the proposal before us is to approve a motion for granting tentative approval of the plat of subdivision for Barat Woods, subject to conditions of approval as recommended by the Plan Commission. Do I have a motion to accept that, or what's the feeling?
And is it with the guidance provided by council this evening?
Absolutely.
So moved.
Second.
It's a roll call vote, please.
Alderman Swarthout.
Aye.
Alderman Grumhouse.
Aye.
Alderman Woodman.
Aye.
Alderman Moore.
Aye.
Alderman Hanrahan.
Aye.
Alderman Levy.
Aye.
Alderman Haddad.
Aye.
7 yeas, no nays, the motion carries.
Next item is any additional items, and I know, Bob, you do have an additional item to bring before us.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor, members of the council. Earlier this evening, we briefly touched on it, but the question has come up. We've received a number of phone calls from residents, commuters, who are using both the East Station and West Side Station regarding our smoking ban. And the ordinance that was passed by the city council does say that there will be no parking either in the station or on the platforms. We just want to make sure that we get clarification from the city council as to the extent, whether you mean it just under the canopy, whether you mean the full platforms, because we will be asking the police department to start more rigorously enforcing that ordinance based on the complaints that we have received. So we're really looking for direction from the council.
Can I ask a question, please? I believe the state smoking ordinance is online in January, I think, of
That is
of this
correct.
year. What does that do in terms of complementing what we have on this or superseding it, just with respect to the train station?
It's a little bit different insofar as that's mostly relating to indoor smoking
Okay.
and not the public areas. Okay. It does affect some public areas, but it's of a more circumscribed nature.
Okay. So it's just our thing?
Correct.
Okay.
You know, as I said earlier when we talked about this in Finance Committee, because we have some extra time, you know, when we passed this ordinance, and I was one of the people who raised this, it was specifically to deal with not only the canopy as well as the platforms, because you get the issue of people smoking as they wait for the train, and everyone else waiting for the train gets the benefit of that, if you will. And additionally, you get a lot of litter, because as soon as the train comes, the cigarettes taken and thrown in the bushes or thrown on the platform. So I think it's good that the city is stepping up enforcement here. We've done a lot to add placards and make it better known to the residents that it is not permitted on the platform, and I think we should absolutely enforce that.
Comments?
I would also encourage any residents who are put off by the smoking to speak up. And, you know, sometimes that peer pressure is more effective than, you know, an intermittent police officer.
And aldermen are certainly free to use their badges, too.
I know I take the train every day, and I go from the East Station, and I do see the same people smoking, and so it's not like they're hidden, and I think we'll probably find them.
And has he seen the size of his badge?
His badge is getting bigger.
Bigger as we go along.
Well, we will
So-
move forward accordingly.
We're all in unison on this issue, and hopefully the men in blue and white do not have to show up as well.
Right.
Any-
Although if they see one of us with our badges down on the ground being I hope they'll come rescue us.
They will come to
Any additional items, Bob?
you. No, that's all I have for this evening.
Well, then I just have one more. A happy, healthy New Year's to everyone. We will see you next year. Can I have a motion to adjourn?
So moved.
Second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
City council meeting is officially adjourned. Happy New Year.